Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Johannes.
And I am Imam. And we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone.
Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and people curious about living a life free of supernatural beliefs. This is a call-in show, and we invite your calls to the number below. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun meetup, often at a bar or restaurant. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's in the Old City for a happy hour tonight after the show for food, drink, and conversation. And Friday we have a happy hour at the Beard and Beer Market. Find us at either of these places. Just look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing up right on the table.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee monthly activities of one of the first and third Sunday mornings are usually lectures with lively round-table discussions. The second Sunday is book club. The fourth Sunday is a reflections gathering, which is a potluck afternoon gathering at a member's home.
Today is Tuesday, August 6th, and we'll be talking about church-state separation.
For many, the separation of church and state are taken as a given for modern countries, but this simply isn't the case. In many places throughout the world, the division between the two is eroding or already non-existent. Rather than static law, policy, or precedent, it is best to think of church and state separation as a constant tug of war between populist religious sentiment and the secular rule of law.
Even in democratic countries, religious influence can affect policy to the detriment of any number of groups. An excellent example of this in the modern United States is our aid policy when it comes to HIV prevention in Africa. Though the U.S. legally enshrines church-state separation, its policy towards HIV in Africa was heavily influenced by religious groups, and in some cases administered by religious groups. In countries where marriage itself is a statistical risk factor, a policy of abstinence-only sex education and encouraging marriage and monogamy as a form of HIV prevention is obviously deleterious for both African communities suffering and the reputation of the United States abroad.
This isn't to say the street doesn't run two ways. Example abound of nations not only embracing secularism, but state-mandated atheism and persecution of all religions. A less well-known but notable example is revolutionary France, which is called Cult of Reason, under which all religious were persecuted to enforce uniformity of non-belief.
I should point out now, in the interest of being fair and balanced.
Whoa, wait, can we use that phrase?
Fair and balanced?
Yeah, do we owe Robert Murdoch any royalties here?
I think we can safely call it satire, or, satire works, and run with it. Hopefully he doesn't call or sue us. Anyway, we'd like to point out that nearly no respectable modern atheists, either within the new atheist movement or outside of it, supports the persecution or criminalization of religious belief.
Absolutely. We have to get our disclaimers out there that at least we get angry callers. Speaking of callers, it's worth noting that this is a call-in show, and you can reach us by calling the number at the bottom of your screen. Moving on, we have the incredibly unique example of Turkey. Turkey is officially a secular republic and guarantees the freedom of religion for individuals. This is contrast to groups.
Yeah, I was thinking about Turkey. Maybe we should get into a little bit of backstory for this to help people. Turkey underwent a revolution in 1921, if I'm not mistaken, and Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, a general, modernized the country greatly after taking power, and part of it was official state secularism, not state atheism, secularism. The state has no opinion on religion and guarantees freedom of religion. Interestingly enough, this led to the military, which has always been very strongly Kemalist, following in Ataturk's tradition. Think of him like the George Washington of Turkey, if you want. Following in his ideology, the military has set itself up as a protector of state secularism in some form or another. This is obvious kind of recently in the attempted coup of 2007, I think, where there were allegations that the military was attempting to overthrow the government, headed by the AKP party within Turkey, who's been accused of being Islamist.
Yeah, the AKP party, if you look at the history of Erdogan himself and some of his quotes, he wrote a song actually, and he was prosecuted for a little bit in Turkey because he wrote a song, a poem, where he displayed complete radical thoughts. And then I would say in the beginning the AKP is trying to show that he's a secular party. But as time goes by, people start seeing the behavior of the party, which is more of dictatorship, or more like showing more trying to enforce people to do certain things. And big example was the whole protests that happened recently in a few months.
It started over a park.
It started over a park,
Yeah.
yes, because he wanted to build and then you can see all the forces that was used to actually clear the park and the protests.
What started over demolition, I think it was.
Yeah.
A demolition of a park turned into a national rallying cry, followed by riots, crackdowns by the police, and it's generally brought to the fore a lot of, granted, although the AKP maintains a majority in Turkey, lest they wouldn't be in government, nonetheless, it's brought forth many, many different groups, from Kemalists to those advocating secular democracy outside of Ataturk's, I guess, framework. All of them have begun protesting in Turkey, and they have a new problem that isn't Kurdish on their hands. So.
Yeah.
But yes, in Turkey, religious groups or communities are forbidden from engaging in political activities. Even more strangely, the dominant Sunni Islam in Turkey is regulated by the Religious Affairs Directorate. This is less an example of church-state separation than a management of the church by the state for political reasons, namely the ability to curb the influence of what is perceived as a threat to the country's politics. Interestingly enough, this has led to a situation wherein parties like the aforementioned AKP face opposition for making reforms some view as Islamist. Occasionally this can culminate in a coup, as we mentioned earlier, and has happened earlier in Turkey. I think before 2007 they had a coup in, I think, the 70s?
I'm not sure about that, but I think, yeah.
But yes, there have been military takeovers of the government in Turkey to prevent Islamism from becoming too prevalent, political Islam specifically, from becoming too prevalent in Turkey.
Well, we aren't endorsing it or denouncing it, but it's interesting. At the other extreme end of this mixed spectrum is Iran, wherein a handful of minority religion, namely Judaism, Christianity, and Zoroastrianism, are recognized, but with severely curtailed civil and economic freedom. Religious schools are overseen by the government and must be run by Islamic principles, coupled with the restrictions on inheritance, restrictions from holding certain level of offices, and probation from high-level military command. This constitutes a strange form of religious freedom from an obstinately pseudo-democratic Islamic republic. Iran isn't alone in this. Texas, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, Maryland, Mississippi, and Arkansas all have constitutions explicitly prohibit atheists from holding public office. Pennsylvania has similar prosecution, though in less explicit terms, enforced or not. These are the laws that exist within the United States.
Absolutely. I am forbidden from holding public office. Imam is forbidden from holding public office in the United States. Anyone that doesn't express belief in I think the wording specifically for Tennessee, maybe it's Maryland, is they're all worded relatively similarly. Those that do not believe in a higher being or a system of rewards in the afterlife, rewards or punishments in the afterlife, are forbidden from holding public office. Even if these aren't enforced, they're nonetheless in our state constitutions and represent a severe breach of church-state separation in the United States and an infringement on not just freedom of, but freedom from religion. It's it's worth noting. But yeah, Iran just seems odd. They have these, I know that there are specifically seats in their legislature set aside for religious minorities, minority groups, but they proclaim freedom of religion, but you wind up with a situation wherein I think it used to be 180,000 Iranian Jews at the beginning in 1979, down to a community of 30,000 Iranian Jews today. Many have fled to the United States after the Islamic Revolution. Although they do often speak of things like democracy, representative government, and freedom of religion, you have to understand that even within an Islamic republic that bills itself as progressive and open about freedom of religion, it's interesting to note that the dominant Shia Islam in Iran does not extend even limited protections to Sunnis, which is of great interest. But
it's actually, Iran is really interesting because if you look at closely at their political scene, you will find that they started creating fake parties that actually say that we are against the government. And as a matter of fact, when the Muslim Brotherhood took over in Egypt, they tried to do a similar thing. They tried to play both the people in power and the people that are anti-people in power. So trying to create what I see as more as a fake democracy, to project as a democracy image, but at the end, it's only one group of people are in power and controlling.
Straw man parties, what fun.
Yep.
I know some Democrats who would accuse the Greens of that, but I can't speak to that. But back to Iran, we see a particularly brutal form of church-state cooperation wherein the state has used religion for its own purposes. During the Iran-Iraq War, pressed for equipment and fearing Iraqi defenses, and I will get right back to that statement because we have a caller. This is a call-in show, and we encourage you to call. But in the meantime, hello, caller. You're on the air. You're on Freethought Forum. May I have a name or nickname for you?
This is Faithless Forest.
Hi, Faithless Forest.
Watching the show, and a question came to my mind as you were talking about the situation in Iran where one sect of Islam was not protecting the rights of another sect. And it occurred to me that perhaps, if you guys know, you could tell me about the origin of the different sects of Islam. I mean, I think I've heard stories to this effect that has to do with the initial succession of leadership after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. So can you enlighten me and the viewers?
Sure. There is two main sects in Islam, which is the Muslim and the Shia. The Sunnis, basically, they believe in Muhammad as a prophet, and they follow the traditional Islam rules of praying, of fasting, and in going to their holy land. Whereas you have the Shia, which is it's a different sect. They look, they take more of someone called Ali ibn Abi Talib, which is actually one of the relatives of Muhammad. But they look at him as he is basically the leader for them. And then his two sons, Al-Hussein and Al-Hassan. And then after this, going through the years, you will see that they start adapting different ways of praying, different way of fasting. After like 300 years, they start separating, and as time passes, the relationship between these two sects gets more and more trouble. And as a matter of fact, recently, in about a couple of months ago, before the 30th of June revolution in Egypt, Mohammed Morsi, which is the Egyptian president, he's a Muslim Brotherhood and he's one of the Sunnis, He came out in TV and he actually made almost a hate speech against non-Sunni sects. And this ended up by 5 Shi'i people being attacked and killed in one of the Egyptian villages. And when the people killed them, basically about 1,000 people, they surrounded their home and they killed them. And then they took their bodies and basically tied down in a car, and they start going around in the streets with it, basically to say there is no place for Shi'is in here. So it's a big conflict, and especially like extreme Sunnis and what we call in Islam Salafis. They basically look at Shi'is as almost as non-Muslims, because they don't Shi'is don't believe and don't respect. They say they don't respect the followers or the descendants of Muhammad, and what we call Ahl al-Bayt, or his descendants, and they respect more the descendants of Ali ibn Abi Talib.
Okay, so you've confirmed some of the things I've heard. I'll confess a lot of details there I didn't follow because, of course, history in that part of the world is only superficially talked about here in the United States. I guess did I hear you say that a pilgrimage wasn't required, and I guess that would have been out of the Shia, that they don't do what I think is called the Hajj, or am I mistaken? Did I mishear?
No, they go do the Hajj, but they have different rules and different customs. So overall, they follow the same way, the same 5 basic rules of Islam, which is one of them is the Hajj. But they wear different clothes, and if you look, for example, of them when they go to Mecca, they wear more black clothes, where others, the Sunnis, they wear white clothes. So they follow the same big rules, but they do it differently.
Okay, well, I think that helps, and I will clear the line, and I hope you get some more callers, and we get some more interesting questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Faithless Forrest. Yes, we do encourage you to call in and ask your questions, discuss with us. This is very important. It's politically relevant. It's economically relevant. But getting back to the separation between Sunni and Shia, it's worth noting that this has been used by countries, again, countries either with or without official state secularism, to political gain. Again, this is another subversion of church-state separation, of church and state separation, when the church or the state will begin to court the church, or the opposite direction, for political advantage against enemies. Case in point, Iran is, surprisingly enough, feared, but not a lot of Americans know this, is greatly feared in the Gulf, primarily among the Gulf states, because of its giant Shiite population, and the Gulf states are almost all officially Sunni. Iraq is of great interest because there a Sunni minority, only I think 20 or 30% of the population
Then you have the Kurds
exists.
too.
Yeah, the Kurds in the north, but overseeing a population that I think last estimates are is 60% Shiite. Therefore, during the Iran-Iraq War, it was of great concern to Saddam Hussein and the United States and all of Saddam's neighbors that the Shiites in Iraq would rise up and make trouble, and Iran exploited that in every way it possibly could, leading to even worse bloodshed. But back to the story, during the Iran-Iraq War, pressed for equipment and facing Iraqi defenses, Iran began recruiting children for use as single-use human minesweepers. They would literally use kids as minesweepers. They were called, I think, the Basiji. I'm probably mispronouncing that because I don't speak Farsi. But yes, you heard correctly. Children used as one-off minesweepers. They say any ship can be a minesweeper once, and any person, I guess, can be a minesweeper once too. As historian Ephraim Kash puts it, quote, on the battlefields of the many battlefield spectacles of the Iran-Iraq War, none has struck and confounded foreign observers more than the blind devotion of the Basiji and their relentless quest for martyrdom. Coming mainly from rural areas or from the most devout Shiite families, these poorly trained and ill-equipped youths, some as young as 12, were little more than cannon fodder or human minesweepers, sent in advance of Iran's other military forces to clear the fields, deserts, and scrublands and marshes. With their red and yellow headbands proclaiming Allah or Khomeini's greatness, a piece of white cloth pinned to their uniforms as a symbol of a shroud, and each one carrying his death with him, and a plastic key around their necks, issued personally by Khomeini as a symbol of their assured entry into paradise upon martyrdom. They charged towards the Iraqi positions in total disregard of the danger to their lives and the shocked disbelief of their enemies.
That's really actually made me... it's very interesting because, you know, it doesn't matter if you're Shia or you're Sunni. The same exact thing happened a couple of weeks ago. Whereas Muslim Brotherhood, they used, after the 30th of June and people outthrow them from power, right now they are having protests all over the country. But they actually, they got about 100 or 200 kids holding their white shrines and walking in the street saying we're okay to die in the name of Muhammad Morsi. So it's amazing how these people, it doesn't matter for them to use kids or whatever it is just to reach their goal, which at the end is actually control and power and being in power.
Yes, when the church and the state intermingle, the head of state can, in a way, become the head of a church. This happened with the Church of England, and it was today it's relatively benign. But in other countries where church and state separation doesn't exist as solidly, or the, I guess, tradition of a ruler as only the ruler and not as a demigod kind of figure.
Yeah.
Khomeini, they proclaim the greatness of Allah or Khomeini. To literally, a quote-unquote holy man puts himself on the same level as God and sacrifices children to achieve political aims. This is what happens.
It's a little it's disturbing. So outside of the manipulation of children to sacrifice their lives, Iran's religious government had other effects on its populace during its war with Iraq. Outside of the normal purge of the military that go with nearly any revolution, Iran built up its own pseudo-religious military loyal to only the Ayatollah regime, the Pastran, also known as the Army of the Guardians of the Islamic Revolution. Advancement of this force was furthered by religious fervor and regime-approved thinking. Naturally, such concerns as experience and sound military thinking were secondary. This led to a disastrous bloodletting, and some could argue only prolonged the war and agony of the Iranian people.
Yes, it's actually kind of interesting to note. You notice this when a lot of religious regimes seem to take power, particularly in the Middle East. They view the military as a threat. And therefore they'll begin setting up their own paramilitary forces, not answerable to the civilian government so much as answerable to whatever this religious party would happen to be. An excellent example of an analogy with which Americans might be familiar is the SS in Germany, or the SA. They were not part of the official military. They were not overseen by the state in particular. They were overseen by the party. So you wind up having a lot of these religious paramilitary organizations, militias trotting around. Yeah. Case in point, the Taliban were a religious militia, basically. That they were both a party, the single sole ruling party, and a religious militia in Afghanistan. And did Afghanistan have a proper regular army when we invaded?
No.
I don't think they did, but nonetheless, you could see this. But case in point, in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood I know had a paramilitary.
They had their own, they had their own militias, and But the thing is, with Egypt, it was too big for them to handle, and they didn't get a chance to put their hand deeper in the system. They tried to by basically start implanting people all over the entire country, but they were not able to penetrate the army, and the police, they were able to penetrate some of it, but the central intelligence were far away from them, and so that's why they couldn't achieve their goal of basically putting their militias and tightening their grip on the country and start the process of transformation like Iran exactly.
Of note, with regard to this, is Pakistan.
Yeah.
Everyone seems worried about, generally the world is worried in particular about Pakistan's nuclear arsenal and the increasing infiltration of the Pakistani military by Islamist elements. And although I think it's called the ISI, maybe is it the ISI? Anyway, Pakistan's intelligence agency is far from what many people would consider good guys. But in this situation, the United States is backing them 100%, almost out of necessity, more than anything else, because they are one of the few groups that generally have not been infiltrated by Islamist elements and or political Islam in general. Well, this is just lighthearted conversation. Somebody should call and join our lighthearted conversation here, or ask questions if you have any. But yeah, the children in speaking of infiltration of the military, it does bring up a point closer to home. The evangelical Christian problems at the Air Force Academy become a little bit more alarming when you think of it within this framework. Let's talk about that. The scandal happened a few years ago. It boils down to a widespread culture of really militant, and I mean that in a literal sense, strain of evangelical Christianity dominating almost every aspect of life at the Air Force Academy, according to leakers who wish to remain anonymous from within the Academy. Following protests by alumni who were clearly disturbed, and some within the Academy, investigations were opened and the issue has been since resolved. But though the private practice of religion is no business of any organization, public or private, government support of proselytization is an unacceptable breach of trust and disregard for the rights of the individual to observe or not observe as they see fit. It's particularly disturbing to see this at the Air Force Academy of all places, not only a public institution, but one of the most government-supported institutions in the country, being run in an almost autocratic sense by pastors. According to some articles read, I think there were 2 priests to serve. Mind you, this is a campus of 4,000 approximately cadets, and you have 2 priests, a rabbi, and 14 evangelical Protestant pastors. I'm not talking about mainline Protestant denominations, Methodist or something along those lines. We're talking the dominion theology types. We're talking those that literally will tell you to be a warrior for God, and not in a spread the good word sense, in a literal carry the sword sense. It's extremely disturbing that the U.S. government would allow this to happen at an institution that was set up to train leaders of our military. This kind of domination theology thing is extremely disturbing, especially when you look at it in light of, I guess, religious movements infiltrating the military in other countries. But
So do you want to move to another case?
Oh, we can.
All right.
I'm thrilled.
So why don't we move to Russia then? Since the breakup of the Russian Federation and the dominance of Putin's United Russia Party, it's difficult to tell who's using whom for influence. Though having no official state religion, Russia has begun adopting policies put forward by the Russian Orthodox Church, and the Church enjoys patronage and very public support of the numerous officials. including Vladimir Putin, with reference to the recent scandal involving the admittedly obnoxious but not overtly threatening arrest and sentencing of the band Pussy Riot for the protesting and intermingling of the Russian Orthodox Church and the state. The Russian Foreign Ministry is quoted as saying Western criticism of the Pussy Riot trial is evidence that Russia espouses Christian values forgotten in the postmodern West.
Extremely disturbing stuff, and we're going to have a mid-show break now, but yes, in case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by these two groups and by individual contributions, but not from viewers like you. Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on the Community Access Television channel. You can also see it streaming online outside of the Knoxville area. Just go to ctvknox.org.
And remember, this is a call-in show, and we're live today, August 6th, 2013, and viewers can call in now to the number on the screen.
I was doing a Marco Rubio there. Anyway, the Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets 2 times a week. We have evening meetups for fun, food, drink, and conversation. Tonight's is at Barley's in the Old City. Please come and join us if you'd like. ASK's purpose is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area. We have a short informational video regarding ASK.
Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org. If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun.
Great.
The Rationalist of East Tennessee has Sunday activities involving lively presentation and discussion of subjects topical and timeless. Once a month we get together for a book club. We need not have read the book to attend, but of course it helps.
I feel like we should probably tell viewers we do have something of an expert available to us today, so Imam, if you care to...
Sure. My name is Imam Fatah. I'm originally from Egypt. I was born and raised in Egypt. Came here to the United States to finish my PhD. Right now I'm a PhD in biomedical engineering. And I was raised in a Muslim family, in a moderate Muslim family, and they raised us in moderation. But really coming here to the States, I think opened a whole new door for me. And the reason is, when you are raised in a certain society and a certain community, you have constraints from the society. It ties your free thinking. Even if you want to think, the pressure, the peer pressure from your family, from your friends, it's not going to allow you to think what are your beliefs, what do you actually believe in. So coming here really and being away from everyone and being away from my comfort zone, it made me start thinking, and especially being a scientist and all the contradiction I've seen between religion and science, I couldn't separate a black box in my head and say, I'm not going to think about this part. And so I start reading, I start thinking, and in 2010 I came up with the decisions that I don't believe in any of these existing religions anymore. And I don't believe of this higher imaginary power. And it was really a challenge for me. Not only I announced that, but I wanted to tell my family, which was a big challenge, telling a family from Egypt that I don't believe in this anymore. But I got it through, and so that's a short story of myself.
We have a caller. Hello, caller. You're on the air on Freethought Forum. May we have a name or nickname?
Yes, Joan.
Joan?
Yes.
Yes. You had a question, Joan?
Yes, I wondered if you could discuss women's rights in Muslim countries. I know they differ from country to country. After the Russians took over Afghanistan, I believe that women had quite a few rights for a couple of years, and then they lost them when we helped
the Mujahideen who became the Taliban, but yeah.
Yes, okay. Just any comments about that I'd be interested in. Women's rights mainly, and which sex are more likely, or which countries are more likely to be willing to give women rights.
Absolutely. Do you care to stay on the air to discuss with us, or do you want us to steer off?
I think I'll just hang up and see and listen, okay?
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for the call.
All right, bye.
All right, goodbye. I know during the Nasserist era in Egypt, women had, generally, it was more acceptable to go without a...
Yes. As a matter of fact, actually, women were wearing micro jeeps and mini jeeps, and this actually extended to the 70s. A big society change started happening in the 80s, once actually Sadat led the Muslim Brotherhood out. And a big society change started happening, and Saudi Arabia started bumping money into the Wahhabis and spreading out these militants and extreme Salafis thoughts. And society change started happening. And in general, the people, independent from the religion, they want women's rights. So, for example, right now, one of the biggest things that people are demanding in Egypt is women's rights, and even in holding political offices. And a lot of women are taking their hijabs off because they saw the true image of religion and how they use it to manipulate people. Whereas in countries like Saudi Arabia, women are not allowed even to drive yet. So women's rights in religion in general, it's very little. And there is no I don't see any civil rights for women really, or equality. It's always, even in the scripture itself, when they talk about women, they always talk about her as a secondary creature, not as a man, as an equal person. So in the Middle East right now, the women's rights are not good. Women are not having the rights, but hopefully with more secularism and more open-mindedness, things are going to start getting back into normal. And it's actually really fascinating because I was just talking to some of my Egyptian friends and telling them, do you know that in ancient Egypt, 4,000 years ago, women had more rights than even here in the United States right now, and they were equally with men in everything. And now look where you are and how you're treating your women. Because I think this is one way to evaluate how civilized the society is how they treat their women and their children.
Yeah, you lose the productivity of literally half of the population by oppressing
it's even
women.
more than half, I think.
Sense. Well, 52.
Yeah.
Makes no economic sense. Why would you do these things?
Yeah.
But we have another caller. Hello, caller. You're on the air on Freethought Forum. May we have a name or nickname, please?
This is Pauline.
Excuse me? Could you speak up again?
This is Pauline.
Colleen? Polly.
And I just wanted to make a comment, and then I'll hang up. I'm thinking that many people don't realize when they want prayer in school and they want the Ten Commandments in the schools and or on the courts, outside courthouse or whatever, that we're talking something very similar to what this gentleman was talking about when there is a lack of separation of church and state. And people want all these things, and they think our country here in the United States will be better for having a more religious bent to it. But I'm thinking they don't realize that it depends on who would be in the have the political power, that it might be a religious person who didn't allow women to wear pants, or one of the religions that don't allow women to participate in the service, even at church. So then why would that not extend to some of the other political offices and so forth? I don't think women here, or even people here in the United States, realize that's a very slippery slope. When JFK got in, people were afraid that he would have a Catholic influence, and he didn't, because he maintained this separation of church and state. But if a particular religious sect got the power, it could be very detrimental to our whole country, I think. Now I'll hang up and just listen to what you have to say.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for calling.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, a lot of people, when they say things like children aren't even allowed to pray in schools, no, they absolutely are. They can mutter short prayers to themselves. They can pray with other students if they choose to do so. The ban on prayer in schools applies only to school-organized groups for prayer funded by or within the school during the school day, meaning that, again, the school district, the school itself cannot support prayer. They are allowed to organize. They are allowed to be an official club, whatever they'd like. It's just that they are not allowed to have organized, led prayer during the school day in the interest of, again, secularism. This is not state atheism. A lot of people like to demonize Madeleine Murray O'Hair over these sorts of things, but again, this is not state atheism. This is not enforcing a set of beliefs or non-beliefs on children. It's in the general interest when people say, well, we can give equal time to different religions. Well, what if the kids are Zoroastrian? Really? They don't have a prayer group. And there actually are Zoroastrians in Iran still. There's a very small community in the United States. But again, we would be leaving out certain groups. Best to exclude religion altogether from public education and or public life, in a sense, policy, that sort of thing, and just leave it at that. If you have a religious motivation to be Christ-like, then be Christ-like. You needn't tell the world, or you needn't pray with the world. You needn't recruit more followers. It seems detrimental. But yes, both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalist of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where you'll find that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. But back to the program. With regard to Russia and its recent, embrace of the Orthodox Church, we're seeing problems with not necessarily women's, but gay rights in particular in Russia. And when I say gay rights, I mean things like assembly. I'm not talking about marriage, which itself is still breaking ground in the United States. I'm talking about freedom of assembly. Things like pride parades or organization or gatherings of homosexuals to discuss rights or to publicize their feelings on these things are broken up violently by the police. It's a disturbing trend, again, because it's difficult to see who's using who in Russia. We have a case of Putin's open endorsement of the Eastern Orthodox faith, and it becoming almost something of a state religion in Russia. Although this is hardly new in Russia. It doesn't end there either. even though in the state atheist Soviet Union, which persecuted the Eastern Orthodox Church and all religions pretty equally, they were at least they distributed that equally. They distributed the persecution equally, if not the nylons or the cars or the washing machines or any of the other things. They began to subvert Eastern Orthodox iconography. You could see it in a lot of early Soviet propaganda and examples where the icons, the 2D pictures used to depict saints and whatnot in the Eastern Orthodox Church were almost subverted, made into Soviet propaganda, replacing either a saint or Jesus with Joseph Stalin or Vladimir Lenin. This died down after Khrushchev, but you can still again see, even in a not secular, a state atheist society, a kind of religion begins to pop up. You can almost call it an atheist religion because it doesn't have gods. Generally, it's called a cult of personality. This has roots going back to the semi-divine pharaohs of Egypt. Alexander the Great started to believe that he was divine after a visit to an oracle, probably before that, given his mom's influence, but that's a different story. The divinity of the Roman emperor, with the cult of the emperor in ancient Rome. The belief that the emperor is semi-divine. Gaius Julius Caesar, son of Venus, had an attendant cult and eventually became a state-supported cult of sorts. And you also get strains of this running through absolutist monarchs. Case in point, Louis XIV, the Sun King in France, although they didn't claim to be divine, claimed to have divine right to rule by birth. Again, you're getting this almost secularized religion, not a godless religion. There is no God involved in this, but certainly your leader should be treated as tantamount to God. And cults with veneration and dedication show up. There are tons of examples. The Lama class in Tibet. I don't support the Chinese occupation of Tibet, but there is no arguing that the the priestly caste in Tibet led very privileged lives and wielded quite a bit of political power. But that's, I'm veering off. We have a caller to bring us back on track. Hello, caller. You're live on the air on Freethought Forum. May we have a name or nickname, please?
Forrest?
Forrest?
Yes.
All right, Forrest, did you have a question or comment for us?
Well, a comment. I was very pleased to hear you mention that in ancient Egypt, women had sometimes equal rights, and that makes some sense when I think of even a pharaoh. Hatshepsut, I think was her name, who was a woman. Mm-hmm. And you're just making me think that you can really judge, as you said, a culture by how women are treated, and we know it also is how minorities are treated, right? But we can also see that whenever we look at pictures, for instance, of our legislators, it's interesting to see sometimes absence of women, or sometimes a woman brought in as sort of a front person, you might say. I'm just saying that I think you can look visually at photographs of our legislators. You can see that America still has quite a way to go. And it wasn't that long ago before colleges, for instance, allowed women professors. And I don't mean to go on and on. I know you don't have much time. But I think if we're talking about sort of a litmus test of justice, we might say that what you brought up in this show is probably as close as almost anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the call. Yeah, it's interesting to look at the composition of our legislature, or even in the sciences. You don't see increasingly we're seeing more and more women in science and engineering.
Yeah.
But I think it also boils down to a cultural treatment of women, expectations. If you're handed dolls as a child and told that by Barbie that math is hard, it really isn't particularly helpful. Again, a litmus test for an egalitarian society, and I think a really much more rigorous litmus test is a society that doesn't enforce quotas and allows people to pursue interest and life goals without impediment as they see fit. This is my wacky strain of libertarianism. But for people to pursue their goals as they see fit and to be treated equally, and we'll deal with it from there. If there happen to be 6% fewer men in whatever profession than statistics would suggest, then so be it. Things have arrived that way naturally. I think that's an even greater litmus test for a society, is to see where people go when treated equally.
And I think he mentioned really a very good point when he said, like, sometimes they just put women as a front end, just to give an image, you know.
An artificial sense of, look,
exactly,
look at her.
Hey, we have a woman.
We have one.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. Oh boy, if I were that woman, I would be terrified.
Well, so just because there isn't God in heaven doesn't mean it's not a religion. Gods can be found right here on earth as talented heads of state sinking holes in one, designing the perfect reading disc and relaying commands to their national team at the World Cup via invisible radios of their own design. Wow, now I feel more crazy for just saying that. Those were but a few things that late Kim Jong-il claimed to do as evidence of his divine in one officially atheist country that persecutes all religions but allow freedom of its religion in its constitution.
Oh yeah, that's North Korea. But yes, we're talking about the glorious Kim dynasty of mighty North Korea. It is a state religion. You could see during the death of Kim Jong-il recently, you could see again that secular iconography. You can see it above me, there. The display of them, their thanatocracy for Kim Il-sung. He's the eternal president. The guy's dead. The guy's been dead since '94, and yet you have this. And of course, just like any religion that wields political power, the North Korean state religion is brutal in enforcing belief. We have a few, not necessarily cases, but reports of police and secret police specifically cracking down on people in Pyongyang who were not openly crying at the death of Kim Jong-il. These are forced tears because if they don't cry and scream out at the funeral, they'll be beaten or possibly tortured or killed. Again, enforcement of belief in an atheist religion. The religion has no gods. It's just replaced God in heaven with dear leader in the palace. It's insane for a country that, again, in its constitution, claims that it has freedom of religion. And I can feel my sanity slipping away the more we discuss this. But modern dictators have, in fact, built up many cults of semi-divinity around themselves without invoking God, as we've said. And it is a kind of atheist cult. This brings about an important moniker of freethinker, and its use as a synonym for atheism. It describes a general belief system that rejects baseless claims. This is important to point out. There are atheist cults. They have no gods, but they worship something as though it were a god. There are state atheist countries, and it's important to distinguish atheist organizations like the Atheist Society of Knoxville, the Rationalists of East Tennessee, and in general, most modern American atheists from France's revolutionary cult of reason, these sorts of things. By no means are we advocating state atheism and the persecution of all religions. We advocate only freedom of and from religion and a secular state. That's all we really want. We're not looking to change anyone's beliefs by force.
Well, the baseless claim, like the changing of seasons and a double rainbow to herald the birth of the dear leader, would naturally be rejected by a freethinker. Not necessarily someone who believes in no gods. There is good reason why what can be termed as the modern atheist movement involves heavy doses of and intermingling with skepticism and the scientific method. I can't do this anymore. The North Korea stuff is just hurting my brain. So
it hurts everyone's brain. It hurts everyone's brain. But yeah, with regards to I guess atheist regimes, it's part of when we mentioned earlier the tug of war between church and state. Even if there is no state religion or state church, there is a tug of war. Generally, free-thinking, atheism, even relatively new religious movements, moderate religious movements, they tend to prosper only in open societies, free and open societies with accountable government. Which again is why what's happening, well, case in point, Syria. We can get back to women's rights. We could see what's happening with the rebels in Syria, the Free Syrian Army. What is it? Something rather Jaish Surya? Something. Anyway.
Yeah, Gish al-Hur, yeah.
Yeah. We could see oppression of women in areas that they control. The Assad regime isn't the nicest regime on the face of the earth, and they certainly do have something of a secular cult of personality around him, coupled with a minority religion, Alawites?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Exercising power over the majority, and it isn't healthy, but all in all, it's a more open society than what we're seeing from the rebels as of right now. It's especially disturbing that the U.S. government has chosen to arm and support these Islamist rebels, just as we supported Islamist rebels in Afghanistan when they were called the Mujahideen and not the Taliban, and just as we have continued to aid the Morsi regime, although it was admittedly democratically elected. We no longer continue to aid the regime, but Senators McCain and Graham are there right now speaking about the Muslim Brotherhood. It should be quite a bit of fun. Do you know more about that than I? Because I have not been able to catch up today.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, today McCain and Graham was in Egypt, do like some kind of negotiations, and before that, the day before, Burns was actually in Egypt. He spent 2 days in Egypt. He visited some of the Muslim Brotherhood leaders, and even in prison. And it's amazing that U.S. didn't pay attention to all the oppression and all the killing that was happening in Morsi's era, and no one even pointed anything. And when people decided that no, these people are a danger to, and this is what I really like. I was very proud when people moved in Egypt, because no one expected this to happen, because they thought that the Muslim Brotherhood came in, they're going to brainwash everyone, they're going to take over. But people were afraid on their identity, their ancient Egyptian identity. Even though they are Muslims, but they are not crazy radical Muslims. So they didn't want these people to take over and destroy their identity.
Yes. It is time to start wrapping things up. Please send us feedback at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. Of course, you can always see us 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 2200 Greenwich Mean Time at ctvknox.org, streaming every Tuesday. We remind you to examine your beliefs. Please join us at Barley's in the Old City. We'll be there probably until around 8-ish, enjoying ourselves for food, drink, and conversation. I would also like to remind any North Korean hit squads seeking reprisal against what I've said today to seek vengeance for our blasphemy, as I said, at Barley's in the Old City. Please call CTV Knox beforehand and leave good comments with our producers regarding our performance so far on air. The Rationalists of East Tennessee are, I'm going to redact their location just because I don't want you showing up there. But yes, for those not with the North Korean government, not interested in doing us bodily harm, please come by Barley's in the Old City and see us. Thanks, and this has been Free Thought Forum.